Welcome back to Garden Studio. I'm Tessa Pinner, a designer and gardener in upstate South Carolina, Zone 8A. Today's video is a collaboration with Southern Living Plant Collection, who have graciously provided me with the plant material for a garden project that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that is plant a front yard hedge. So I will tell you more about why and my reasoning for wanting a hedge in the front yard in the first place when we get up there to put the plants in. But first, I want to introduce you to the plant collection if you already don't know about it, which is probably, if you're watching this video, you probably like plants and you probably know all about the Southern Living Plant Collection. But I was introduced to it several years ago, actually at several of my favorite local retail nurseries. And the whole idea behind the plant collection was really to provide useful solutions, garden solutions, for the home gardener that are scaled for residential size, so not things that get absolutely giant. We're all looking for things that stay compact and do well in sun, things that bloom without a huge amount of input, things that are going to be useful ground covers or do well in the shade. All of these different almost garden niches, the plant collection has many things to address specific niches, and I have used many of the plants for years. So in the description section of this video, I'll just list out some of my favorites that I use over and over. And just for fun, I went and cut some from a Southern Living plant. This is October Magic Snow. This is a Camellia sasanqua, and we're actually in November now, but it's just blooming now absolutely gloriously, just white flowers everywhere. It's such a joy to have flowers at this time of year. The planting approach today will be to dig individual holes rather than dig up the whole bed area. And here's why. First, we're going into the dormant season for the zoysia lawn, which means we won't be dealing with the aggressive creep and the maintenance issue involved for about 5 months. Once the lawn wakes up, it will be a different story. And maintaining all of those different holes would be really challenging. The winter period before the grass wakes up will give us some time to figure out what we may want to do with the rest of that bed space. So I do have a long-term design plan for the front of the house. And like most of you, I'm just chipping away at it a little bit at a time. This is both the agonizing patience building work of building your own garden, and I think it's also some of the reward, because you really appreciate every little thing that you get to do. I'll show you on paper my vision for the whole space, which looks significantly different than it does now. But I've gotten this request before. What are your plans for your front yard? You don't talk about it. And we haven't seen very much of it. That's because it's so much a work in progress, but I think it might be fun just to show you my vision of where I want to head with it over the next 5 years. And part of that, key essential piece of that, is this hedge that we're planting today. Let's go do it. I have here 5 Oakland Hollies from the Southern Living Plant Collection line. These are wonderful screening plants, and I will talk a little bit more about them in a bit, but I wanted to give you an overview of the idea of the planting here. You can see the yellow flags laid out. These are markers for where the hollies will go. They are on 6-foot centers, and you'll notice when I talk about the mature size of the plant later, that is actually pretty tight spacing. And for hedges, one thing we like to think about is how fast are the plants going to grow together. So because I want this to become a solid screen, we are doing a closer spacing than what you might think just based on reading the tag. So this is part of my front yard. We also don't think about hedges often as part of a front yard. A hedge really can be anywhere. It can be in the back. We have hedges, and I have a whole video on hedges used in the back of our property specifically for privacy. This one I wouldn't say privacy as much as enclosure. the feeling of enclosure. You've probably been to a new build or a new subdivision, maybe you live in one, and there's almost an uncomfortable feeling of exposure. When there isn't any planting wrapping a garden or wrapping a yard, you feel like you are just totally exposed, or like a house was plopped in the middle of a field, which is often how a new subdivision or a new development starts. So one thing that makes a garden really comfortable is that feeling of enclosure. It can be vertical enclosure, think large trees. It can be horizontal enclosure, a fence, a hedge. I'm not saying the whole thing. I'm saying just having parts of your garden enclosed makes you feel really safe inside of it. So sometimes even that extends to the front yard. I selected this variety, the Oakland Holly, specifically because I did want some significant privacy. So it's called Oakland. You can see reminiscent of a red oak leaf, and they are not quite as shiny as some. It has a little more of an elegant matte finish, which I think is beautiful. Berries in late winter, which will be ornamental and also great for the birds. I think sometimes hollies get a bad rap, especially if you happen to live in an older neighborhood and you inherited lots of, let's say, Chinese hollies that were often planted extremely close to the house, and they get really, really pointy. These do have a little bit of a point to the leaves, but they don't hurt the way the really spiky Chinese hollies do. And I'm not planting this right next to my house. So I think a judiciously planted holly is one of the most valuable landscape plants that you can have. The Oakland holly, according to the tag, gets about 15 to 20 feet tall, and usually tags are over about the course of 10 years. So we're not looking at 15 to 20 feet tall tomorrow or next year or even in 2 years, but that's telling you mature size over about 10 years. The width on the tag is listed as 12 to 15. So to kind of go back to the conversation about spacing, my flags are 6 feet apart. So a 12 to 15 foot wide plant, but think that's at the base. That's over 10 years. I want privacy before 10 years, and I don't want to see gaps at the top. If I have a naturally cone-shaped plant, which this is, so here, and I have them at the recommended spacing, then I have what is going to look like cones in a row. And it will be that for a while they're growing in, but a mature hedge I want as a seamless flowing mass, not as individual plants. So that's a big reason why we ignore the spacing, for the intended look long term, and also so that we get our privacy more quickly. So right now, the trees are being watered in. They are on a 15-minute each slow drip. This is really important for a first thorough watering, for it to be a slow water. Otherwise, you'll just displace a lot of soil. And after this, they will get mulched. So you can see what I meant about it not being one contiguous bed yet, but that will come in time. I thought it would be fun to walk you through a little bit of my design plans for the front yard. So whenever I do a concept, this is roughly how it looks. I have my handy dandy trace paper here, or scratch paper as it's called in our field. And that just makes it really easy for me to get ideas out, and it's not precious. I have probably done 10 versions of this. So you can see here, this is really not polished. This is the outline of the front of the house. Here's the existing front walk. My goal with this is to get a plan that I work towards. And we have actually been doing this. So last year, we planted a Japanese maple here. This portion here is existing. This right here is a black gum tree. It was my birthday gift this year. So I knew I wanted it, here's my kitchen. I knew I wanted it on axis with the kitchen window so that I could look out and see it. Basically right now, this is blank except for this tree, and now here is my holly hedge. So when I'm looking out primary views, this is a thing to always think about, is primary views from inside the house. I stand here in my kitchen a lot, in front of my kitchen sink. And what I wanted to do was narrow the view going this way, right? So that it felt more shielded. There's a significant mass over here. This is a magnolia, actually an evergreen magnolia and a deciduous magnolia. So I wanted to do like this with the view and the feeling of enclosure. But as you can see, I have a lot more planned. So over time, I would like to do a lot of beautiful blousy perennial planting. This is an existing magnolia. This is an existing crepe myrtle. These are 3 small Coosa dogwoods that are in place, but they're so small they don't look like much yet. This in here is the lawn that is going to become almost a violin hourglass shape. This area here, this time of year gets really beautiful sun. So here's a bench and here's a bench to give a place to sit. If you have a garden with nowhere to sit, you're basically asking it to be a pass-through rather than a place that people spend time. I've moved my paper up and you can see here, I just started a perspective sketch on the top portion of my scratch paper. I ran out of room, but this is enough to tell me a good bit of what I want to know. So let's say this blob mass here is the holly. This is my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I've planted, all grown together over time. This is the birthday tree. This is a mass existing magnolias. And I wanted to look at how is this going to feel from the outside. You know, I'm thinking through inside, of course, but I'm also thinking through what are people going to experience when they arrive in the curb appeal. So again, this is a very rudimentary sketch. This was 30 seconds, and I show you this because it doesn't have to be gorgeous and perfect to be a design tool. This is not something I'm presenting to a client. This is for me. This is something you can do for you. You can take a picture, you can draw over it, you can use it as a reference and kind of draw a version of it below. I knew my scale was sort of close because of how I had it down here, mirrored up here, but I want a view in here. So that's what this viewing arrow is where is the view in? So I've blocked the view here, I'm blocking the view here, I'm opening the view here with low planting. I'm opening the view here to really welcome you. And then I'm going to be blocking it again here. And this is a classic technique in designing a garden is you open, close, open, close, open, close. That makes things feel really interesting. It also makes things feel intimate. Think of the Garden of Versailles. It is the opposite of intimate because everything is open. It's so grand, but ultimately that's not the kind of home landscape we want to live in. And personally, you know, if you're in here, let's say, you know, you're out here with the kids and you have a view out. You don't feel like there's just a wall in front of your face. You have a view out here. You have a big view out here, but you also feel really safe and like you are in your comfortable private space because of the enclosure. So this is really all about enclosure. It's all about the feeling that you want when you're in your garden, even if that garden is a front yard. Thank you again to Southern Living Plant Collection for providing the hollies for this project. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful week in your own gardens. Happy gardening.